Hey everyone, welcome. We were having some technical difficulties, but I think we got it. So if you are here, give a shout and let me know that the video is good, that the audio is good. Let us know. And I'm going to bring Dr. Wednesday Martin into the stream. Hello, Dr. Wednesday Martin. Welcome,
Hello,
welcome,
Leah.
welcome. We're
Hello,
live in the
everybody. Thanks for having me.
sometimes just like the restart button is what does it with the
I mean,
technological challenges.
yeah, I think that's a metaphor for life. Sometimes just unplug your life and plug it back in.
That's
Or
right.
sometimes just hit the refresh button on your life and see what happens. It's a good analogy for everything.
Yeah. It's funny because do you know Mel Robbins? She's like a motivational speaker. She's been on Lewis House podcast as well.
Oh, okay.
And
Familiar name.
yeah, she's phenomenal. And she was talking about every time she hears, like if she's like waiting in traffic and she hears the car, like the newer cars, like will restart when they need to go. That's like a reminder to her, like, what in my life do I need to press the reset button on?
Yeah. How do I design myself so I just restart myself when I get to that moment?
Exactly. I mean, if this year or this past year has taught us anything, it's reinvention and adaptability.
Yeah. I mean, we have really learned some hard, probably unwanted lessons. But yeah, I think a lot of people, when we got to the new year, a lot of people took that opportunity even more to sort of double down on the idea of refreshing, restarting, wiping the slate clean. I think it was really meaningful for people, especially this year, whether it's, working on themselves or their relationships or their relationship style. Yeah, a lot of people want to be that car that can restart itself.
Yeah. It was funny because I was listening to one of your Instagram lives with Dr. Alexandra Hambright Solomon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Solomon. I love Dr. Alexandra Solomon. So much wisdom there.
So much wisdom. She's a fellow Chicagoan, so every once in a while we'll meet up for like a walk and talk.
Oh, great.
But she was talking about how, like, gosh, if there's anything that women can do during this year, it's like turning to themselves and learning about their bodies so that when we're able to be in connection again and touch each other again and be with each other again, that we'll have that knowledge.
That's such a great point. Very few people think about sexuality as a muscle that you can build alone. Yeah. But we know from data, like, for example, Dr. Lori Mintz just did a big study. She's the author of Becoming Cliterate, and she just did a study which demonstrated yet again that when especially women know how to please themselves sexually, whether with toys or hands, what kind of porn they like, what erotic things work for them, and what actually mechanically works and mentally for them to have an orgasm, they are more orgasmic in partnerships. So your point is really well taken. And I myself dedicated myself. I said, if I'm getting one thing out of this pandemic, it's that I'm going to be extremely fit. So I gave myself the gift or the punishment of Zoom workouts with the trainer 3 times a week. And I just stick to that no matter what. And I also said, I'm going to have orgasms in different ways than I have before, more often than I have before. And I'm going to prioritize that in a way I didn't. So I hope a lot of people listening today, and a lot of women especially, might take your example and perhaps mine. And that you're so right. Women often hesitate to work on themselves. It feels selfish, particularly when it comes to our sexuality. But the data are clear that the more we do that, the better orgasms we'll have, and the happier that we will be sexually. And we know that sexual pleasure is a necessary ingredient. I like to say that sexual pleasure isn't the icing on the cake, it's the cake. And then I always say, actually, it's the vegetables. So pleasure is a big part of sexual health, and people didn't talk about that for a long time. Pleasure was extra. I believe it was the CDC that removed sexual pleasure from the definition of sexual health back in 2016, which was such an American move, right? You wouldn't see French people doing that. And but they did put the definition back in, and it does stand. We have a lot of data telling us that sexual pleasure is important to your physical health. So get it, prioritize it.
Yeah. I mean, if I think about my OBGYN visits, they ask me 3 questions. It's like, are you being abused? Do you want birth control? And, you know, do you want to get checked for STDs? Like, we don't talk about pleasure, you know, even with our sex doctor, essentially.
Yeah, there's the trifecta of experience of women in the industrialized West, by the way, where we tell women, oh, it's so great, you're so lucky, life's so great in the industrialized West. If you're a woman, oh, American women have it so good. But the questions that your OBGYN asks you speak to the reality of where women are socially, particularly after 4 years of Trump. But, you know, it's worth noting there's a reason that we're not asking women about sexual pleasure. And as an anthropologist, I always look at cross-cultural data. I look at the worldwide ethnographic data to understand sexuality. I look across cultures and also across species. And when I was writing my book Untrue, one of the things that really struck me was...
For anyone who doesn't know Untrue or what it's about, can you give like a one-liner?
Sure, absolutely. I wrote a book called Untrue. It has a very long subtitle, Why Nearly Everything We Believe About Women, Lust, and Infidelity is Wrong, and How the New Science Can Set Us Free. So it's kind of a burdensome subtitle, but it does explain what the book's about. The book reviews the data from social science and science about female sexuality, and it presents in an accessible form to the lay reader newer studies from multiple fields about who women actually are sexually. There have been decades, actually centuries of confirmation bias in sexual science, particularly about who women are sexually. But we know when we misrepresent who women are sexually, we're also misrepresenting who men are sexually. So the book is, on the one hand, it's a Valentine to the scientists and social scientists, many of them women doctors, women primatologists, women sex researchers, who are changing the portrait of what female sexuality is. So for example, just a brief example, we used to think that women had lower libidos than men, and then a female sex researcher developed a new metric for measuring libido and found that male and female libidos are very balanced. That's just one example of newer science that I believe can set women and men free regarding their sexuality, because the information that we get is so bogged down with confirmation bias. So I hope people will enjoy the book. Part of it is also just like a personal, I always blend, my job is I'm a social scientist, and I blend science and storytelling to help people understand themselves in new ways, why they want what they want, why they do what they do, why they feel what they feel. So I used that technique again with Untrue, and it has to be delicious, right? If sexual science isn't delicious, I shouldn't call myself a writer and a social scientist. So I tried to make it delicious. I'm sorry, I can't remember where we were before I went down that cul-de-sac.
That's okay. Well, you said something that kind of made my ears perk up, which is this new metric for evaluating, sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, was the new metric related to like responsive desire and versus
Exactly. Yeah, and people might be familiar with this, but a sex researcher and therapist named Rosemary Basson was seeing couples in her practice in Canada. I do not know why Canada has produced so many awesome female sex researchers. I'm always like, you guys, is there something in the water that like Meredith Chivers and Rosemary Basson and Sarah Hunter Murray and all these amazing.
Oh, yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's great. So Rosemary Basson, one of those amazing women Canadian sex researchers, was sitting with couples, and they were describing desire, arousal. People kind of confuse those terms, but at the most basic level, you could say that arousal is the physiological part and desire is the psychological or emotional part. So she was listening to her patients individually and as couples talk about that. And she noticed that, as a sex researcher, she had been schooled to believe what Darwin said, in the 19th century, in the mid-19th century, Darwin asserted that when it comes to matters of sexuality, males of virtually every species are pugnacious and assertive, and females are choosy and coy.
Right.
So we've been living in the shadow of that assertion for a very long time. So one of the things that Rosemary Basson, who went to school for sex research in the shadow of that assertion, learned was that men across the board have higher libidos than women do. Right? And that remains one of the sacred cows of sex research. I went to STAR one year, and which is the Society for Sex Therapy and Research annual conference. And some women were presenting data about measuring a woman's libido. And, some sex researchers really took exception to any departure from the idea that men are more sexual than women.
Yeah.
Now, it's worth saying that Rosemary Basson was talking to her patients decades ago. When I say how the new science can set us free, unfortunately, a lot of new insight about female sexuality and who women are sexually has been around for 40 or 50 years, certainly for 30 years, but it hasn't crossed into the mainstream because confirmation bias is so strong. So to make a long story short, listening to her patients, she thought, wait a second, we're measuring this thing, sort of spontaneous desire, when people are saying, and suddenly I want to have sex and I'm turned on. Yeah. She said, but a lot of my patients, and we know that men experience this too, but she said a lot of my patients are describing something else, not this linear Masters and Johnson model, but this thing where like desire and arousal, it's not so, it's not such a straight line. And so
it's not like seeing the attractive person on the street and you get an erection. It's more like when I think about my own eroticism and really being turned on, it's like, the exchanging the text messages, it's the teasing, it's the anticipation.
Super all really sexy. Yeah. So for some people, arousal precedes desire. For some people, desire precedes arousal. And when we really get down to it, and we measure spontaneous desire, men seem like, whoa, their libidos are so high. Yeah. But when we measure this thing that you're talking about and that Rosemary Basson describes very well, and I explain it in quite a lot of detail in my book, but when we measure responsive desire, if before men were here and women were here, we measure responsive desire, women are here. And then if we measure women who are in the reproductive phase of their life history, and we measure them at certain points in their menstrual cycle, they might be up here, leaving men here. And the reason this is so important that we understand responsive versus spontaneous desire, the reason it's so important is imagine the shame of women here, right? The shame they feel that, well, I must not be a woman because I like sex more than my male partner. Right. Now, we're talking a lot about heterosexuality right now because unfortunately, a lot of sex research has focused in the last decades on heterosexual couples. We really need to know more about queer couples. But what we do know is that when we measure it the right way, a woman's libido is nothing to tisk. And it's every bit as powerful, across metrics that are accurate as the male libido. So we've got to dispense, first of all, of this notion that men are more sexual than women, that they like sex more. That's also very shaming to men, right? Because Sarah Hunter Murray talks about this. If we hold on to this model where, whoa, male desire is here and female desire is down here, what we're doing to men, as Sarah Hunter Murray points out, is we're profiling them as these sort of energizer fuck bunnies. You're supposed to just be able to pick him off the shelf and he wants to have sex no matter what. And Sarah Hunter Murray has shown no. She's shown what we kind of knew. No, sometimes a guy doesn't feel well physically. Sometimes he's not feeling emotionally connected to his partner. Sometimes he's under stress, and sometimes he's not an energizer, ever ready fuck bunny. And let's stop teaching men that that's how they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, Sarah Hunter Murray wrote the book Not Always in the Mood. And we actually did a Facebook Live with her probably a year ago. So I'll link that up in case anyone.
She's one of my favorite sex researchers. Yeah. Very funny story about her is that I met her at the Society for Sex Therapy and Research, and she had a finding that she didn't know was in her research until I asked her about it. And it was a finding about women boring of sex in long-term relationships before men do. Yeah. And this is what I love about Sarah, that she sat there and she said, wait a second, I didn't know until you wrote that was part of my research. A lot of researchers don't want to hear anything that they didn't think they were writing, or in another much more unfortunate case where somebody's not as open to correcting selection bias or confirmation bias as Sarah is. Sometimes people just don't want to hear this idea about women and monogamy and women's libidos being as strong as men's. Sometimes people just literally can't hear it. So I love Sarah's open-mindedness, and I love how Not Always in the Mood is really freeing for men and women alike. And that's also what I tried to do in Untrue. Yeah. It's a lot about the research about female sexuality and monogamy across species and cultures, and non-monogamy, but it aims, to serve men and women alike.
100%. You just quoted an interesting stat about, in a long-term relationship, women's desire for sex really plummeting, while men's is probably kind of like even and like a slower decline. Can you talk a little bit about that, and then the role, how important novelty is in keeping things fresh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might be preaching to the choir here.
Right.
Because you guys have read Esther Perel's very important work about this. This work really first was articulated. Esther crossed it over so beautifully and powerfully and importantly. But this idea really rose a lot from the research of a sex researcher named Dr. Marta Miana at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. So here's the deal. We know from many, many longitudinal studies from many countries, from the US, from the UK, from Finland, from Germany, in study after study, what we're seeing in these well-designed longitudinal studies is that, in general, women lose interest within the first to the fourth year of a long-term, exclusive, cohabiting relationship, right? So, and we see that this happens, for example, Annika Gunst, who's the Finnish sex researcher, discovered that this happens even when women at, say, year 3 are saying, I'm able to tell this partner what I want and what I like in my orgasms. I'm having a lot of orgasms, but they're still bored of the sex. So that was a really powerful finding. Meanwhile, Kristen Mark, one of my favorite sex researchers, had a similar finding that for women only, within the first year of a long-term cohabiting relationship, female desire dropped off, and it was predictive of infidelity. There's a great UK study of several thousand UK adults by Cynthia Graham, and they're between the ages of 17 and 70, I believe. And she found that for women only, a steep decline in desire within the first year of living with somebody. And then there's the famous couple of German studies in which we see that female desire drops precipitously within years 1 and 3, whereas male desire sort of declines more slowly over the course of 9 years. So I wrote I wrote an article for The Atlantic last year for Valentine's Day in which I reviewed all these data. And the article is called Women, the Bored Sex.
Yeah.
And I've never encountered more resistance to an idea in my life. I mean, I write about controversial topics just because they're the naturally most interesting things to me. So I've encountered resistance to ideas that I put out there before, but I've never experienced such sort of concerted pushback as this idea that in the aggregate, women lose sexual interest in their long-term partner sooner than men do. And I was naive. I thought there are these reams of data. Marta Miana has gone and shown this before me. Esther Perel has written about it as well. I have mountains of data here. And also, I'm a comparativist, right? So I don't talk about something about female sexuality until I have confirmation from multiple disciplines.
Yeah.
What was happening was multiple disciplines, from primatology, right, to medical science, to field biology, to anthropology, to sociology, were all converging on a single point, which was that in the aggregate, monogamy is harder for women than it is for men. And I naively thought that because I had so many studies and confirmation from so many different disciplines that this was the case, that I could simply put that out there and it would be fine. And people would say, oh, look at that. Wow, well, that's really surprising, but here are the data, right? And there are all these reasons. There's data when we look at the sexual behavior of non-human female primates, and there are data in the medical literature of women getting bored sooner than men, and in sex research. It's really it was the most interesting response to my work ever. And it was mostly men.
Right.
It was mostly men, not exclusively, but when you tell women this, like when I do my salons with women, I mean, you can't imagine the recognition on women's faces, the DMs I get, the women, you know, when we could talk in public, coming up to me in public and saying, hi, I don't know you, but I read your book and I want to tell you, like, that's me.
Yeah.
I love my partner. I really want it to work, but I'm about to find a way to blow up this relationship just so I can go have sex with some new people.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think that Esther Perel summarized Marta Miana's research really interestingly. What I should say is Marta Miana saw this, right? She's a researcher who saw and understood that women were coming to her and other sex therapists and saying, I don't want to have sex with my husband, or I don't want to have sex. Again, we're talking about mostly heterosexuals, unfortunately. We really need to blow out sex research to be more inclusive.
Right.
But they were saying, I really, really want my husband, and I don't.
Yep.
I really, really want my live-in boyfriend, but I don't.
Yeah.
I really want sex to be exciting again, and it's not. Now that presented as women like sex less.
Right, right.
Ha ha ha. Marta Miana, like a good scientist, said, let me get into this. And she did a qualitative study. And she did a deep dive with 19 women. And she said to them, and they would say, I mean, she's so much fun to interview. She like gets up and walks around and makes her point. But she's also super focused on data and very cautious. So she said that she would talk to these women and they would say, I can't tell you, I'm so upset. My libido is gone. I used to be so into sex. I don't know where my sex drive is. Where is my desire? I just don't feel it. I'm broken. Help me. Yeah. And she would say, what if you could have sex with this really hot guy? Oh God, yeah, like yeah. She was the person to connect those dots. What's presenting as low desire is just an inability to feel desire and to be desensitized more quickly to sex with the same person over and over and over and over and over again. Women go off that first in the aggregate. And so as Esther Perel said, and Marta Miena said it to me as well, you know, it's harder for women. Women have a harder time wanting the sex we can't have.
Right.
Men are like, this is the sex I can't have. Great. I'll do it. I don't care that she like left dental floss on the, you know, on the bathroom sink. I don't care that she didn't flush the toilet. I don't care that we're like finishing each other's sentences. I want to have sex with this person. I want to have the sex that I can have. And meanwhile, for women, that's not the case. And I want to say really clearly that that's not because female sexuality is more complicated. That's not because women are more complex. It's because, in my view, as somebody who views the lens through anthropology, both primatology, the study of non-human primates, and cultural anthropology, the comparative study of cultures, through my lens, the way to understand that is not that women are more complicated or, oh, we're just like, ooh, what even are we sexually? It's that women have an evolved appetite, like female non-human primates, for sexual variety, for sexual novelty, and for sexual adventure, because it confers many, many benefits and has conferred many benefits throughout our evolutionary prehistory. It's just that right now we're put in a container that not only stigmatizes it, but denies it. So that's what low female desire is about. It's about taking women and who evolved particular appetites that were healthy and adaptive and dropping us into an ecology where we're not allowed to do that. Or some of us are privileged enough that we can ask for it and engineer it, but many women can't. And so we pathologize female sexual boredom, and we're trying to give women female Viagra and talk therapy with their husbands. And okay, sometimes that's important and sometimes that works, but we're not looking at this very important fact, which is women were designed for multiple partnerships. And now we're living in an ecology where we can't have that.
Yeah.
Now, we can't have that without being shot, many of us. Now, we are, as a species, we're extremely flexible sexually. You know, the Homo sapiens are here because we are extremely flexible sexual and social strategists.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we're thriving.
Right.
Especially women. So what looks like an epidemic of low female desire is an epidemic of female sexual boredom.
Right.
And women feel like, well, you know, I got to do this anyway. I guess I'm my mom. I guess I don't like sex. And then they start having something called service sex.
Yeah.
Right? They're doing it in the service of their relationship. They're doing it in the service of the gender script that says if men don't get sex, they'll go somewhere else. So they're having service sex. Service sex isn't fun and exciting. It's routine and it's stultifying and it kills your spirit. Yeah. And so, yeah, no wonder women don't like sex. They're not allowed to have sex with novel partners, or we're not at least helping them understand they have an evolved, healthy appetite for novelty that they can fill in many different ways, including by still being monogamous. But we're not giving them this information, so they think, I'm a freak. I'm not a real woman. There's something wrong with me. And and I guess I'm my mom or my grandmother, and I'm just going to have service sex to keep this other person happy. That's the epidemic.
Yeah. And I know you've spoken about in your book the role that economics plays in this whole picture. So in the countries where women have opportunities to be financially independent, be the breadwinner, you're going to see a lot of different trends versus they're going to be weighing in countries where that's not the case. They're going to be weighing like their survival against sexual desire, and usually like survival is going to win.
That's right. Well, yes, and that's just so well said, and let me just reframe that a little bit. So the difference between my book and the book that a psychologist might write, say, or a sociologist, is, again, I'm an anthropologist. So I look at cross-cultural data. Okay, so here's what we know. A couple of things. Again, to my point that we always say, oh, women are doing so well in the US. What a great place to be a woman, right? So I said, let me look at this data.
Yeah.
And the data are clear that this is a lousy place to be a woman, especially to be a woman of color. Yeah. So there are several metrics by which we measure where is it a good place to be a woman.
Wow.
One metric is, are there meaningful rates of female labor force participation? So not menial labor, but menial labor, but meaningful labor. Wow, how many Fortune 500 CEOs in this country are women? That's meaningful labor force participation.
Like 3% or something? Not even.
Almost none.
Yeah.
Then we go to, so what we know is that when it comes to meaningful labor force participation, of 200 countries ranked.
Yeah.
Do you know where the United States is for female labor force participation?
In the middle?
We're not even on many rankings. We're not even in the top 80.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about meaningful female political participation.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
We trail Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Belarus. We trail many countries in meaningful female political representation. We've never had a female head of state.
Nope.
We lost our collective minds when Hillary Clinton, people will still say, no, it's just that she was a shitty candidate. And they're blind to the fact of how upsetting to the social order the idea of a woman being the most powerful man in the world was to people here. It's not upsetting to people in Germany. It's not upsetting to people in the UK. They have a long tradition of female monarchs and female prime ministers. Yeah. And by the way, that's the reason that women outpace men in infidelity in the UK. I'll get back to that. Okay. Yeah. But so a third metric is my favorite metric of how much freedom do women really have is what happens to women who decide not to be monogamous in this country. Mm-hmm. So I looked at different countries, and femicide, which women being murdered, we think of that as a thing that happens in Latin America, crimes of passion. We think of that as something that happens in Saudi Arabia. A lot of women in the United States die at the hands of their domestic partners or their husbands. Yeah. And many times, according to researchers like David Lay, the reason for that is not actual infidelity, but just the suspicion of infidelity. So I try to reframe it for people who say, what are you talking about? This is the greatest country in the world to be a woman.
Yeah.
I say, in Saudi Arabia, a girl can be drowned in the family pool for kissing a boy. In the United States, women are murdered at a surprising rate for exercising autonomy. Many times they're not killed for the suspicion of infidelity or infidelity. Many times they're killed simply because they leave their partner. And that's one of the most common causes of mass shootings is that women have left a partner and asserted the most basic autonomy. So we have crappy rates of female political participation, crappy rates of meaningful female labor force participation. That's the data. And I always say to people, sorry if you don't like the data, but there they are, right? Yeah.
Not to mention reproductive rights.
So yes, and a woman can be killed here, and it's not unusual for a woman to be killed here for exercising the ultimate bodily autonomy of saying, I might be married to you or in a long-term relationship with you, but I'm going to have sex with him or her or them, right? So those are the metrics that I looked at. And here's the other point that matters. In an ecology where men out-earn women, out-represent women politically, where men are the ones legislating laws and making the rules, and where men are sort of the doers and the actors, and we pay men more, and we respect men more, and we let men make our laws, how much do you think we care about female pleasure? Are we going to prioritize male pleasure in an ecology that builds up men and pays men more and lets men make the laws? Or are we going to value female pleasure? Right? So that gets to the orgasm gap in this country, which Lori Mintz and Debbie Herbenick have written about beautifully. The other point I want to make is through the lens of anthropology, you have to look at ecology to understand female sexuality. So there's all this stuff about female labor participation, female political participation, and what happens, my favorite metric of female freedom, what happens to a woman who cheats or says, or who's open about it. Right. And the answer is that in the United States, there are a range of coercive strategies from slut shaming to murder that people use to control female sexual autonomy. All right, why? And the difference in my work is that I look at material circumstances across cultures that have created this world in which women earn less and are outrepresented politically. And the reason is really surprising. And it's that wherever in the world there was plow agriculture, women end up doing really poorly. So, and the reason for that is also surprising, and I get into it a lot in Untrue, but basically in places where there's plow agriculture, you see that we sort of transitioned from being hunter-gatherers, where women supplied a lot of the calories and women had a big political voice. Then we transitioned to this ecology where men have one advantage in a plow agriculture ecology.
Biceps.
Upper body strength. So through this one arbitrary advantage that men had, intersecting with plow culture.
Yeah.
Suddenly men are outside, women aren't out gathering and being free and autonomous anymore. They're in the house. They're secondary producers. They can't push the plow. Now men are running the show. And I get into all the details, the sort of cascade of effects that happen after that in my book Untrue. But suffice it to say that, as my friend Helen Fisher has said, plow agriculture is the worst thing that ever happened to women. Yeah. And it's the worst thing that ever happened to female orgasm. And in cultures where there was never plow agriculture, or where there was paddy agriculture, where everybody pitches in, including women and children, right? Then you see the fates of women are very different, and women have more sexual autonomy, and those other metrics are closer as well. So plow agriculture was very bad for women's sex lives. We also know that I cite this really long, wonky, wonderful paper about plow agriculture and gender roles. And what we learn is that if somebody comes from a place where there was plow agriculture and moves somewhere else, they bring those ossified attitudes that brawn matters. That men should be inside and women should be out. That men should be outside and women should be inside. The reason in the United States that men are never house cleaners and women are never lawn care providers is plow agriculture. Yeah. It's also the reason we have an orgasm gap. So I hope people will read Untrue, which connects all those dots.
Since you brought it up, the orgasm gap, so you shared this really horrifying actually, statistic that only 4% of women have an orgasm during first time hookup sex.
Right. Yes. And that again is from a study by Dr. Lori Mintz. Hookup sex is a really great metric to look at when we are trying to figure out how to fix female sexuality. Yeah. And I don't mean that anything is inherently broken or wrong about female sexuality. It's not.
Right.
The female orgasm isn't super elusive. We have data showing that when men and women are masturbating, it takes them about the same amount of time to have an orgasm. There's nothing difficult or fussy or, like coy about female orgasm. It's about lived social circumstances. So hookup sex happens in a particular ecology.
Right.
An ecology where men out-earn women, where men out-represent women politically, and where we prioritize male pleasure. So what is hookup sex going to be? It's going to be women serving men.
Yeah.
If it's heterosexual hookup sex.
I heard this amazing. I was listening. Do you know Sophia Bush's podcast, Work in Progress?
I do. I don't listen to it, but I've heard of it.
So she was interviewing this really interesting woman, Cindy Eckhart, who's done some work with, you're nodding, it sounds like you might have heard of her. So she was instrumental in creating a pill for women's low libido. And she was saying for so long, actually for like really the past 20 years, every time we turn on the TV, every time we turn on the radio, we get a message that men's sexuality really matters.
Well, that's because men really matter. Men have the power. In any ecology where men have power on metrics that you can measure, like I told you about, then men are going to be having more orgasms, and female pleasure is going to be a low priority because women don't have real power. So, to her point, by the way, I think that most women who need a pill for their libido, they're just bored. Their libido, as Marta Miana discovered, is very likely to come roaring back if they have the opportunity for some sexual variety and novelty. But that's a different cul-de-sac that we
different conversation. But what she said that I thought was so powerful is that women have been told that their duty is to deliver pleasure, not to own their own.
Watch porn. Watch porn. 99% of mainstream porn. I mean, thank God for my friend Erica Lust, and thank God for Cindy Gallup. But 99% of mainstream porn is that cum shot is about the man having an orgasm, right? And you have to see it and watch it because that's sort of the narrative push, if you will, in a culture that devalues female pleasure. We're going to prioritize in cultural texts like porn the cum shot because man ejaculating is the thing that matters the most because men have the most power. So yes, that's absolutely the case. And we can see in contexts where women have actual power. And for example, when we look at sort of relatively untouched hunter-gatherer populations, or in Untrue, I look at a tribe called the Himba. They live in the northern part of Namibia. And in those ecologies where women are doing important work, supplying a lot of calories, they have a strong political voice, we see that women are free to pursue their sexual autonomy the way they see fit. And it is no coincidence that among the Himba who have never seen a plow, they have the highest rate of extra pair paternity of any small scale society in the world. Why? Because women have real power, and because the ecology is such, and I get into that a lot in Untrue, that it's in men's best interest to tolerate female infidelity. And so it's just a fact of life that women have multiple partners. Nobody bats an eye, and nobody bats an eye when a woman has a child by her partner who's not her husband when she's married. So ecology plays a really important role, and plow agriculture created Donald Trump, and plow agriculture created the fact that hookup sex is all about women sexually serving men. So, and by the way, there's another reason that this happens. In hookup sex, you're just getting to know somebody. And if you're a woman with a man, you have been most likely, unless I'm your mom, or Esther Perel is your mom, or Leah Marshall is your mom, or any of these Facebook members are your mom or dad, you most likely internalized a lot of messages, like you said, that you're there to supply the pleasure, but also just shut up, right? Like, just be quiet. Don't say, it's embarrassing to say what would feel good for you. Right. So it's just the practical thing about hookup sex being such a shit show for young women, unfortunately. And God bless the ones who enjoy it. I got nothing against casual sex, hookup sex, nothing against it at all. But a lot of times hookup sex happens when people are wasted, especially college age people. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Yeah. Social stigma, being drunk and living in an ecology where men are in control means that a young woman especially is very unlikely to say, hold up, okay, here's what I want you to do.
Right.
We only just met this guy. She's going to have a hard time. He's not going to have a hard time saying, yeah, I really want you to suck my dick. Right. He's conditioned to say that. She's going to have a hard time saying, especially if they've both been drinking, she's going to have, and they don't know each other, and she's been raised in a household in a world that tells her male pleasure is the thing.
Right.
It's going to be impossible practically for her to say, okay, listen, my clitoris, I am a like stage right, 11 o'clock, indirect. That's what I need, right?
Yeah.
That's
and could you do it for more than like 1 minute? Could you stay there for
exactly? And I need you to stick with it. By the way, I'm so glad we're hooking up. I'm going to need you to go down on me for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Just put your head down there. Just stick with it. Right? So in the best of circumstances, many adult women don't feel that it's okay for them to say and do that. They don't feel entitled to that because they're not earning the money. Yeah. They're not running the country. Of course, they don't feel entitled to an orgasm. So we're going to have to change material conditions on the ground in order to change women's sexual fates in this country. And I always say, all right, Kamala Harris is going to be good for women's sex lives. And our lives are going to improve even more when we have a female president.
Yeah.
Or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Then we're going to see some real improvement.
Yeah. I was just chatting with a woman in the group recently who she's in a long-term marriage, maybe 25 years. She's very dissatisfied sexually. They tried to open up.
So she's totally normal.
Yeah. Tried to open up. Her husband had a lot of big feelings, jealousy, insecurity. Mm-hmm. They closed the relationship. And she works full-time, but she works in a field where she makes almost no money. And, they have a big house and he makes a lot of money. And so she's in this position now where it's like, okay, do I disrupt everything so that I can have the sexual life that I desire? And if not, what are my options?
I mean, this is such a great point about how ecology plays such an important role. We just see it again and again. And I mean, that's what I bring to the sex research lit. And looking at sex that's a little bit different is just continually looking at ecology. What makes it okay for a himbo woman to have 3 kids by her boyfriend while she's married, but dangerous for other women in the United States, or just extremely high risk for this woman that you're describing, right? Look, there's an expression among couples therapists. They call it the golden rule. Mm-hmm. He who has the gold rules. Right. The person earning the money calls the shots. The person making the laws calls the shots. So it is very, when I was writing on True, I noticed that when I sort of put out through the grapevine and had a sociologist help me find women who were willing to talk about non-dyadic sex and that they had done it. These women came from across the board, every economic circumstance. I talked to women who were cops, and I talked to women who were CEOs of big companies and running the show. But the thing that I saw consistently is the women who could be open about it and unapologetic about it tended to have money. They were either independently wealthy and they said, I can do what I want. And believe me, when you let women do what they want, very infrequently is it going to be lifelong enthused monogamy. So I kept saying, wow, I'm hearing from all these women who are independently wealthy or wealthy, because of their work. They're the ones who are more able to say, I want to be open, or, hey, you're great, but I have a kid with this guy in London and I'm going back and forth. Because nobody's going to take her house away. Nobody's going to take her lifestyle away, and nobody's going to divorce her. Or if they divorce her, she can say, wow, have fun with that. Like, you know, I'm set. For many women, we have to really look at this. You know, when we talk about women being more monogamous, it's nonsense when we look at the data, because women cheat as often as men do. And we see that in numerous studies like the General Social Survey for years running. But, you know, the thing is that we really have to look at, when we talk about monogamy, much monogamy that women are doing that seems like a choice is coercive. It's basically enforced monogamy. I talk to so many women in New York City where divorce is a very big deal. And before I did this work, I interviewed women who were elite, right? They were very wealthy, privileged women, married usually to really rich men. And the ones who had their own family money were saying, I'm out. Or I'm having an affair. And the ones who didn't have family money were saying, I have to be so careful, right? Those women, infidelity is going to be an extremely high risk social and sexual strategy because they will pay literally. So what we see is that when women have kin around them and they can just like go live in their parents' house, for example, they're more likely to take risks for their sexual satisfaction. So you don't have to be rich in terms of money. You could be rich in terms of kin relationships. But your this person's dilemma exemplifies and is a beautiful and sad example and testament to how material circumstances have a coercive effect on women's sexual expression. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to get something so that I can charge my laptop.
Yes, do it.
Excuse me.
And I'm going to grab a light because it's the sun setting here. I should go a little bit. So.
Yes, like everything is changing. Everything is always changing.
It's a little better.
Bear with me for a moment here.
No worries. I'm getting lots of amazing feedback in the comments. Dr. Wednesday Martin is the best. Dr. Wednesday Martin said it, so everyone's super enthused. So I know we're kind of getting to the end of our conversation. I have some group member questions.
Oh, please. I love group member questions.
That I wanted to touch on. I like did so much preparation and we've gotten to like 10%, you know.
I'm sorry, but you know what? I mean, all the preparation worked because it brought us to this point. So thank you, even if we didn't get to your topic.
Sure. I always do. I actually really love the process of like preparing for interviews. It's almost like scheduling an interview is like, okay, now I know I'm like really going to dive deep into this work, which is exciting.
Yeah. And it's an art form, you know, to ask to be the person in your position. So thank you for that work.
Thanks, Wednesday. And people are saying, really needed this today. This is amazing and confirms everything I've felt forever. This is great and funny. I feel so normal and understood.
Anthropology is really one of the best tools for women, especially to understand their lives. Like when you show women cross-cultural data, and when you show women also the sex research data that just shows that they're normal, that's so much better than just having a sex positive attitude and saying, of course it's okay that you're bored of sex in a long-term relationship. That's okay. It's when you show women, especially studies and data that normalizes their experience, that it becomes, I think, truly helpful and freeing for them. So I'm glad to hear that some people are feeling that way.
Yeah. Someone else said it feels like she was speaking directly to me, which I love.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple group member questions. So the first is, this was a group member who said, Dr. Martin mentions doing activities that increase your heart rate and are exciting with your partner to prevent the sex drive killing effect of monogamy.
Yes.
What activities has she found that work well? And what does she recommend to women on a regular basis to keep their desire up for their significant other in a long-term monogamous relationship?
Wow, great question. I mean, that's the question, right? You can tell people a million things about how they're normal and so on, and then they're like, okay, what do I do?
Right.
And I love that. I mean, I love combining social science and storytelling with service. Like, I'm here to serve these women and tell them what experts have told me, and draw the dots between the data to serve them better, because they deserve sexual satisfaction. Look at me. You are entitled to sexual satisfaction. You are entitled to tell your partner that you want an adventure, that you want to change things. You deserve sexual satisfaction, even if you live in an ecology like you do that brutalizes female pleasure. You deserve it. So I love this question. And here's my short answer. There have been numerous studies since the 70s about a phenomenon called misattribution of desire. And people might be familiar with one of the studies, the initial one that got a lot of attention. Sorry?
The bridge experiment?
No, the roller coaster experiment.
Oh, okay. I know it is the bridge experiment. Okay.
Okay, well, the roller coaster experiment is you put people on a roller coaster and they have this shot of adrenaline. They're dropping, they're loop-de-looping, they're screaming. Their nervous system is excited in all these particular ways. And lo and behold, the roller coaster ride stops and they look at each other and they feel an intense sexual attraction. So the neurocircuitry of our brains can be fooled. And this is great news for women who get bored in long-term relationships. First, in the aggregate, the great news is you can fool your brain into thinking that the excitement of doing something new is the same excitement as sexual excitement. Your brain will make that leap. So what can you do? It doesn't have, you don't have to go on roller coasters. You don't have to skydive. Just chill. You don't have to do all that to change your sex life. There are data indicating that just doing something new that's not sexual.
Right.
Taking like a tango class with your partner, but it could just be a ballroom dancing class when we can get back to that. You yourself going for a walk in a way that you don't usually take your walk, going to a different neighborhood. You could do something exciting and new, like watching porn together if you've never done that. You could watch a Zoom doesn't let people do sex parties, but like Adult Friend Finder and the other places that are doing sex parties, you and your partner could watch a sex party, and that would feel new and exciting. You could go for a run together if that's not something you usually do. And by the way, physical stuff like running, that is also, the clitoris is all erectile tissue, right? The entirety of the female clitoris is as large as the penis. Most of it is inside your body. Women get hard-ons. So if you want to feel excited, you need to get yourself a hard-on. So you need to both do things that give you this idea of excitation, like misattribution of arousal, like a roller coaster, like taking a dance class, like just doing something new. But you also need to serve your erectile tissue. And we know that cardio exercise is one of the ways to really serve your erections. So I would like women listening today to tune into their erections. You know, if you're sexting with somebody, if you see somebody sexy, if you have a sexy thought, can you feel yourself getting a hard on?
Yeah.
Because you do get them. Add more things to your life, women, that give you a hard on. Tune in, first of all, to the fact of it happening, because it is happening, because you have as much erectile tissue as a man does. You wake up with morning wood. You get hard-ons throughout the day. If you're a woman, figure out what makes you hard, what turns you on. And cardiovascular exercise is going to work to keep that erectile tissue healthy and doing its thing.
And probably core, like lower core exercises. Well.
Yeah, there's a lot about that. And one of my favorite sex researchers, Dr. Debbie Herbenek at the Kinsey Institute, did a great and to me kind of hilarious study about ways that women have orgasms.
Right.
There is something called a coregasm. that women have had. And it's not just that women can have an orgasm from doing core work. One woman in Debbie's study reported that she had a coregasm. She had a coregasm from doing core work. And then a few days later, she went to the grocery store, back when we did grocery stores, and she put her hands on the grocery cart and started to push it and had an orgasm.
Whoa.
Other women in the study, so there's coregasm. You could work on that, on having a coregasm. And you could Google that and look into it. I would make sure that it's legit. A lot of people in the wellness industry are just full of shit and really take advantage of us about things that really matter to us, and they know they can hook us about sexuality.
Sure,
so
sure.
Be aware of that.
Yeah.
Ask your doctor or your Pilates instructor about coregasm and to give you exercises. That's a great thing to do. And the other things in Dr. Debbie Hergennick's paper were just amazing. Women having orgasm. One woman said, "Oh my God, I had an orgasm during a statistics exam just from anxiety."
Oh,
right? We know from studying penises that a penis can become erect from anxiety.
Sure.
So can your clitoris, and that can like push you over the edge sometimes. So I suggest that people Google Debbie Hergennick's paper. I think it's called Variety in Orgasm. And you can see all the different ways that women have orgasms that just might be really interesting to you. But yes, find your ways, prioritize them, pay attention to that clitoris. It's doing stuff down there, and we have been taught to tune it out. But I can definitely tell when I have an erection, and that helps me know the things that work for me. And I want women to become fluent in the language of what makes them hard.
100%. And I feel like Jaya's erotic blueprints could be helpful there, because I know personally, I'm like very much motivated by words erotically. Mm-hmm. So like texting is like a really, really easy way for me to get super turned on. Whereas for other people, it might be more kink, or it might be more, like a romantic environment.
Yes.
Handles.
Yeah. I mean, just find that thing that works for you and tell yourself, I'm sorry that I'm getting a phone call right now, but tell yourself this matters.
Yeah.
You can't find your erotic blueprint, your jam, your mojo, whatever we're going to call it. You can't find it if you don't truly believe that it's important.
Right.
That means making it a priority, like brushing your teeth. I tell women, you're not going to go without brushing your teeth. Are you going to go without giving yourself pleasure, since pleasure is an integral part of physical health?
Yeah.
So this is doctor's orders. Pleasure contributes in critical ways. Sexual pleasure contributes in critical ways to physical health. I gave a whole talk on it in Italy before COVID, and all the data showing that orgasms, women having orgasms, it improves physical health. So it's important to give it the priority it deserves. I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you a prescription. Do it.
Amazing. Doctor's orders. Okay, so final question. I love the last minute questions that come in right before we go
right
live.
As the hands on the door. I think psychoanalysts have a term for that. When the patient's on their way out the door and they're like, oh, and by the way.
Okay, so this is from a female group member. She said, "It was 2 years since my boyfriend's online infidelity. My libido started decreasing substantially about 6 months ago. It's gotten to the point that I don't even masturbate or fantasize. I especially don't like the same sex I used to enjoy with my boyfriend. Anything remotely kinky feels off the table. I once felt excited to explore with him, but now it's a turnoff. Obviously, the infidelity is still causing problems for us, and he's really not satisfied with this change in me. I feel like I'm still holding resentments. It's caused so much stress in our relationship. Any advice would be appreciated."
I mean, I just want to honor that the reality in our country is, we are not Himba, right? We're not the Himba. And infidelity in our culture really is can feel like a blow, like a physical blow.
Yeah.
And as Americans, we are taught that infidelity is a horrible betrayal, and we experience it that way. And I want to honor that. So I want to honor what she's going through. That it is really hard in a culture that tells you, well, he did that because he doesn't love you. He did that because you're not good enough. He did that because men are just like that and you can't trust them.
Right.
It's really hard in that context, even harder than it would be in another context, to process infidelity. So I just want to honor that she's on a timeline with this. And there's a reason that she's having a hard time. I want to honor that. And I also want to encourage her. I have worked with people, heard from people who I was completely shocked to hear that they said that once they had worked through it, the infidelity made their relationship hotter and new, made them better communicators. And in many cases, if the man had been the one who stepped out without a discussion in an undisclosed way, it also opened the door for the woman to think about, am I interested in that or not, and why? So the first thing I would suggest at this point in the timeline is it's been some time since he did that. And so the lag between him doing that 2 years ago and it being only 6 months ago that it really started to impact their timeline, her sexual desire for him, I would want to get very curious about that with somebody who really knows. And I would suggest working with Dr. Tammy Nelson.
Yeah.
And I would make an appointment right now with Dr. Tammy Nelson for yourself, not as a couple yet. Like, look into it yourself, treat yourself to that. That's important. And I would actually, I don't mean to sound self-promoting, but I would read my book, because it really gets at, the different, responses to infidelity worldwide. And I think that sometimes when people have a broad context for their own experience, when they broaden the context and look at how infidelity is experienced other places in the world, that could be a comfort. So I'm going to suggest those two things to her, and also just give her so much praise for wanting to engage with this rather than just bury her feelings. It's so wonderful that she wants to get curious about this and find a way through. And I want to also tell her that she will. My God, millions of people before you have survived infidelity, and you definitely can too. And you deserve a sex life that you absolutely love, and you can have it. So just keep telling yourself that, and talk to Tammy and buy my book.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, for joining us, for your expertise, for the important messages that you shared. I wanted to give you an opportunity to just tell people where they can find you. If you have offerings, I know you do your Wineless Wednesdays, IG Live.
I can talk about that. Sure. Thank you. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me, and thanks to everybody for being here. Thanks for this opportunity, Leah, to connect with your group. I appreciate it. So people can find me on my Instagram. It's at Wednesday Martin, PhD. On Twitter, I'm at Wednesday Martin. And I try to stay off social media, but it's very hard for me. And then I do something called Wineless Wednesday every Wednesday, 5:30 Eastern time on my Instagram Live. It's a sober space for people who are sober curious, or who are sober, or who are just considering maybe being sober, or even people who just want to be sober for half an hour during the cocktail hour on a Wednesday. So please join me on Wineless Wednesday. We usually have a really interesting guest. We had somebody teaching us how to do shibari recently. Sometimes we have somebody giving me a makeup tutorial. Sometimes we have a sex researcher. Wineless Wednesday is always fun and low pressure, so I invite everybody to join. You'll probably learn something about sex, and you might learn something else too, depending on who the expert is, and you'll be sober for half an hour or 45 minutes. I also, one last thing is, that I have a podcast called True Sex and Wild Love that I co-host, and you can find it wherever you download podcasts. It's always one of the top rated thanks to people like you, podcasts and sex and relationships on iTunes. And that's what we talk about. My co-hostess and I, we talk about sex and relationships, and particularly open relationships. And we always have an interesting guest on. So that's where people can find me. And I hope they will, because I love to hear from readers and followers. I'm sexually obsessed with you. Everybody in this group, I'm sexually obsessed with you.
Amazing. Yeah, that was one of I was reflecting on like 2020, and one of my big, moments was getting introduced to polyamory and now identifying that way. So that was.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. That was
wow. Well, congratulations for finding like a relationship container that feels good to you.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. That's a lot of processing and talking. Yeah. And it's a lot of work to deal with the stigma. So I really respect that, and I'm delighted for you.
Thanks, Dr. Martin. Really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for having me.
The comments have been off the chart. The engagement has been off the chart. This is maybe like second to our conversation with Esther in terms of like people watching.
Oh, I'm so honored. Thank you. I'm so honored to be in this group. I really love Esther's work, and I love being among people who are familiar with these enlightened ideas about sex and monogamy and all of it. Thank you so much for letting me part of the group today.
Thanks again. We'll catch you soon.
Take care. Thank you so much. Bye, Leah.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.